Hi, my name's John from the virtual training team, and welcome to this short piece around change and some key tips, 3 key tips to think about, particularly if you're managing change or you're being asked to cope with change in organisational settings. First of all, the traditional methodology of thinking around change is that it's manageable, that it's in sort of fixed time periods, and there's a start, there's a middle, and there's a finish. Actually, modern thinking says change isn't changing any longer. It's just transitional cycles. We just move through change. It will never slow down. It won't stop. So sort of get used to the idea that change isn't going to go away. We're just going to be constantly transitioning into the future. So how are you going to shift your mindset to cope and do well, given that is going to be the future environment? Secondly, I always like thinking around, what's the process of change for me as a human and others around me? And I often relate to Janssen's The Change House, where he says, we live in the room of contentment, and then change comes along. We sort of go into denial. It won't affect me. I don't want to do it. I won't be forced to do this, or I'm not going to employ myself in this, or engage with this in some way, but actually, eventually you have to. Some people go into deep denial. In fact, they go into the dungeon of denial. And then eventually we start to work things out and think that we need to move forwards, and we go into the room of confusion. And Janssen then says, well, sometimes people get so confused they go into a sort of pit of paralysis. But finally we start to work out the way forwards, and we get into this room of renewal. And then once we've renewed, things start to settle down before the next change or the next transitional cycle comes. We start to bed things and we go back into contentment. And just for me to consider as a manager of change, if that's what I'm doing, where I am in that change, sort of moving through those rooms, and everybody else is in the team that surrounds me. Where are they in those change rooms, and how can I help them to move through? So that's sort of tip number 2, the change house. We know people move through, but how do I help myself and how do I help others? And that actually brings me on to the 3rd, final tip, about understanding the reactions of others in change. We might think the change that we're going through, or the transitional cycle that we're going through, is brilliant, but others around us might not. They might have built the pathway. They might be invested in what we've already got. They might really like it. They might feel change fatigue. They might enjoy the status quo. However, we need to make that change. So understanding their reaction to the change, talking to them about it, and dealing with that reaction is really important. I see many managers and many people in change thinking, this is great, everyone else should think it's great, and yet they don't. And they often really struggle to take the team and their colleagues with them. So do talk through with people about what their reaction to that change has been, and work out the way forwards. So 3 brief tips. Think of change as transitional cycle, the change house, and how which room you're in and how you're reacting right now to the change and moving through. And then finally, do engage with the others around you if they're in your team, thinking about where they are with change and how they're managing that change. I wish you all the best.